what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy the
Harold Perkins has made his decision on what he wants to do for his football future. And on Friday, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he announced that he is actually returning to LSU for the 2025 season. This makes a lot of sense to me because if you look at his college career, where realistically would Harold Perkins get drafted? Not only is he coming off of a major injury, but he's kind of a guy without a position right now, if that makes sense. Now, we all saw him in 2021, right? His freshman year, 2022, he burst onto the scene. He had 7.5 sacks, 72 tackles. He had an interception, and people thought, well, this is the best defensive player in college football. Now, in 2023, you moved him more towards that middle linebacker spot, and there was mixed results, right? We saw some things we obviously did not like, and then they kind of moved him back to the edge again. And a lot of people will say, oh, he was terrible in 2023. If you look at the numbers, 72 tackles in 2022, 73 in 2025, same number of tackles for a loss with 13, 1 interception each year. He had 7.5 sacks as a freshman. He had 5.5 sacks as a sophomore. So once you moved him back to that edge position, his numbers in 23 are really similar to what they were in 22. It's just when you saw him at linebacker, you could tell that he was out of place. Then this season, you wanted to try him in that star role, right? The role that Major Burns ultimately took over. We really only saw him there for one full game, and before he really got started, he has the injury. He's done for the season. The reason I mention Isaiah Simmons and why this makes sense for Harold Perkins to come back, if you remember Isaiah Simmons, he was the stud on those Clemson Dabo teams that won the national titles, and everybody said, hey, he can play linebacker, he can play safety, he could rush off the edge. It doesn't matter where this guy plays. He could make an impact. You look at Isaiah Simmons. He's been in the league for 5 seasons now. In 2021 with the Arizona Cardinals, probably his best year. He had 105 tackles. He had 4 tackles for a loss, and he had 4 sacks. Then the next season, he followed it up, 99 tackles, 5 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks. So you're like, okay, he's got a little bit going. He's never had over 54 sacks any of the other 3 years that he's played. And the reason why is he's kind of in that tweener role, a lot like a Harold Perkins. Perkins needs to find one position and stick to it. Now, a lot of people want to put him back on the edge. And I get it. Freshman year, he was excellent. He was your edge rusher. 2 problems. One, he got schemed out of games. Me and Moose were literally just talking about this during break. As good as he was in the Arkansas game, the very next week, you saw Alabama say, okay, you're on the left side of the defense. We're running all of our plays to the right. Oh, you're lining up on the right? Well, we're just going to go to the left. And they completely schemed him out of games. And essentially, he was a non-factor, and he disappeared in those big ball games with teams that knew how to scheme around him. It's part of the reason you moved him to inside. You said, hey, if he's in the middle of the defense, it's harder to scheme around him, which on paper is a good thought. He just never really looked comfortable at that pure middle linebacker spot. So where can he play this year? Again, a lot of people say edge, but you're also really good at edge all of a sudden. Sure, you lose Swinson. You lose Savion Jones. You lose Deshaun Womack, who's going to Ole Miss. Gabriel Relaford showed a lot of flashes as a true freshman. Then you signed Jack Pyburn, you signed Patrick Payton, and you signed Jamari Butler from Nebraska. All of a sudden, you have 4 guys that you believe can make a big, big impact on this team at edge rusher. I'm not saying don't blitz Perkins, but there are bigger needs left to fill that I think Perkins can help you. Mainly the star position. A report came out this weekend that reportedly Major Burns is not with the team in Houston, so it doesn't look like he's going to play in the bowl game. Now, obviously, Harold Perkins is not going to help you in the bowl game, but there's a spot up for grabs at the star position. You would initially think Javian Toviano, but just a few weeks ago, Brian Kelly said, hey, we have moved Javian Toviano to safety permanently. I think that's his more natural position. Let him learn that position instead of moving him to safety and then moving him back to nickel. We saw it with Sage Ryan. Now, look, Sage Ryan, a lot of people say a lot of different things about him, but I gave Sage a pass up until this year because Sage Ryan came to LSU as a 5-star safety. Out of necessity, you made him play nickel for 2 years. Then you actually had him move to corner. He had never really played his true position until this season. Now, we finally saw it. There were some mixed results, but what would have happened if Sage Ryan would have played safety from the jump? I like Harold Perkins at nickel. Not only because we had seen him play there and he showed flashes. There's a big hole there with Major Burns leaving. And here's what you can do in that star role in Blake Baker's defense. If you need an extra pass rusher, well, just scoot him up a little bit. He can blitz off the edge from the star position. You need him in coverage, back him up as a third safety. What about linebacker? You need a 3 linebacker set instead of a 2. He can scoot and he can cheat inside a little bit and play that spot. He can play all of those hybrid roles from one true position at star. And you may say, okay, well, if you line him up and blitz him off the edge, what happens then? You could move a Javian Toviano or a Joel Rogers. We'll see what he has. Jawan Johnson was the number 2 star in fall camp behind Major Burns. They wound up moving him to offense out of necessity, wound up moving him back to defense, and he didn't play a ton, but he's certainly a guy that's athletic enough to do it. There's options there, but the star position, very much up for grabs, and it's one that when I see Harold Perkins, that's where we see it. Because what do we talk about? College football is expanding. You have the no-huddle offenses, right? You get the ball in space. Harold Perkins was a great tackler out in space. As good as he was in rushing the passer, a lot of people forget he wasn't bad in pass coverage, even as a true freshman. When he had that interception in the Auburn game, which really helped you seal the deal, it was the fake play with Coy Moore that I'm sure every LSU fan loved to see after Moore transferred. Perkins, he kind of cheated up a little bit, looked like he was going to blitz. At the snap of the ball, he bailed. He was right there for the ball. I mean, he's got the ball skills to do it. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he can blitz off the edge, and we've seen him cover. I think out of all the positions on the field, star is that spot where maybe he can make the biggest impact because of all the things we just talked about, right? I don't think he's got the natural ability to play that safety role. I think that's a little bit too much for him. And then again, going back to your depth all of a sudden at outside linebacker. Jack Pyburn, Patrick Payton, Jamari Butler, Gabriel Relaford. I mean, those guys are going to be battling each other for reps. Do you really want to stick Perkins in there? Because a guy like Perkins, you stick him at that pass rushing role, he's not going to be an every down player. And that's what you saw from him as a freshman. Again, I mentioned how his numbers were similar from 22 to 23. The reason it seemed like he made such a bigger impact as a freshman is because he wasn't an every down player. But when he went in there, he made the most of it. In 23, the overall numbers were similar, but there weren't as many big plays, right? There weren't as many splash plays in these key moments. I want Harold Perkins on the field as much as I can possibly do. I think the best route to that is at the star position filled by Major Burns. Now, look, we'll ultimately see what they do. I think spring football is going to tell us a lot about where they like Harold Perkins, but I think this was a great decision by him to come back because, again, 2 years ago, everyone said, hey, this guy is going to be a first-round pick. I got to tell you, I don't know where Harold Perkins gets drafted because, you know, he's had some mixed opinions of it in the last 2 seasons, and he's coming off of a major injury that cost him the entire season. And he probably goes 5th round, 4th round if he comes out this year at absolute best. It was a great decision for him to come back and increase his draft stock, and a huge win for Brian Kelly and Blake Baker to strengthen up that defense and hopefully put a player in a huge position of need heading into the 2025 season.
Wow, Jake. What incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.